There is no question that something is here, lurking, somewhere in the darkened corners. But how will we ever find out what it is? We need to look, always, and never stop. No matter what stands in our way, no matter what others may think. Explore the darkness, shine light into it. Join the red strings and the silver threads. Everything is connected, somehow. I am Mark L. Watson. This is Peer Beyond the Veil.
I was terrified to stay in that house alone. By the time I went to college, I was very pleased to leave. And even when I came home from college, I would pretty much go out to the pub and drink as much beer as I could in order to spend the night there. And even if I was drunk, the activity in the house that seemed to be associated with me and my arrival at the home would sober me up pretty rapidly because of I'd come in from the pub, I'd go I would stay on my brother's floor and on a sleeping, in a sleeping bag. And I'd know I'd locked the door, but then you'd hear the front door open and close, you'd hear footsteps come up the stairs, you'd hear someone sighing and breathing, and eventually they'd reach the landing and my bedroom door would start to open. And at that point, usually I'd scream blue murder, but sometimes my father was there before I got to that point because he heard it too. And of course, there was nobody there. The reading of everything I could lay my hands on around magic, occult, supernatural, theosophy, all that kind of stuff, and the activity all culminated in the sort of idea that there's something about reality that is magical, and there's a lot more to reality than we acknowledge. And I started a career. I went through college, started a career. I eventually went off to the US, spent 20 years there, grew a family, as you do. And during that time, I realized that I needed to pursue systematic training. So I joined this school out of the UK, a real school of magic called Servants of the Light. At the time, it was run by a beautiful old lady called Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. And I did the correspondence course for 5 years, which was Kabbalah-based and taught the basics of magic. So meditation, through meditation and through visualization. And really what you're learning is about yourself, because the inside is the outside, and you are basically, it's that microcosm, macrocosm idea that I create my own reality, and depending on the state of my internal personage, so to speak, is how my outside world will look. I can influence my outside world through understanding myself. I developed the inner contact that you're supposed to develop, I guess. And that's when I wrote the book, my first book, Inner Journeys, Explorations of the Soul, which was the experience of going through that five-year course and starting to communicate with this entity, which I believe is my higher self, probably. And it calmed everything down. It made my life much better in the sense that all of this haunting stuff, all this ghost stuff, all this demonic type activity just stopped. And I now look back and I realize that when I was younger, I was probably on the other side of things. I was probably lit up like a Christmas tree and attracting all kinds of unwanted things. And once I did this course and sorted myself out internally, psychically, magically, if you want, I became less of a target. And I continued to write and think and consider, I got into quantum physics and talked to a lot of people, met a lot of people, and started to write about my own experiences. I wrote My Haunted Life, which is supposed to be a ghost story book, but not all of my stories are ghost stories, they're supernatural stories. And then I started asking people around me, friends, relatives, don't you have any stories? Have you never seen a ghost? Nothing strange happened to you? And I collected a bunch of stories and wrote My Haunted Life 2, and then My Haunted Life 3. And at this point, I'd run out of victims, so I started a website called myhauntedlife2.com, where people submit their stories. And of course, you get some really wild stories, and you get some really scary stories as well. So things like, I never heard of the black-eyed kids until I started getting stories about black-eyed kids. And so I wrote a couple of books about the black-eyed kids, but I don't just take the stories that people have submitted, usually anyway. I take a theme. So with black-eyed kids, with the old hag, sleep paralysis, which is the subject of another book, I use my stories and other people's stories to accentuate and exemplify what I'm talking about. But I drill into what is a black-eyed kid? What is the old hag? And I've come to the conclusion, which I think is shared with other people, like Anthony Peake and other writers, not just in occult and supernatural, but in a sort of broader human consciousness awareness arena. And I really think that there are other entities in our reality that can be created by human thought, can be created by your own thought, or may have an independent existence.
What would you define as reality? What would you say is real? Real to you? The hand in front of your face? The table? The keys? My voice? It's only real because you judge it to be real. If your eyes and brain were reprogrammed, you may not see the table the same way, hear my voice as you hear it now. But it would still be real to you. If you dream, is that real? Culturally, we say no, it's just the imagination. But what if you see something whilst you're awake, but that not everyone else can see? Reality is a subjective experience. Reality as you know it is made entirely in your own mind. It is what you make it. If you open yourself to something, you open yourself to another aspect of what you judge to be your reality. There may be more here, around you, next to you, inside you, that you don't see. But that doesn't mean it's not there.
Well, it's tempting to think that everything is thought projection. And I have a PhD and I'm a PhD scientist. So some people are incredulous when they hear some of the things I talk about. But I think it's, from a quantum physics perspective anyway, I think it's quite theoretically possible that the observer creates the reality by an act of observation. There's lots of quantum physics experiments that demonstrate exactly that point. They also can demonstrate that particles can be aware of each other even though they're billions of miles apart. So there's some kind of connection between things in remote parts of the universe that we're largely unaware of. So having said that, my view is that there is a range. There are all of the above. So Franz Barden, who is quite a famous Czech magician, he wrote 3 or 4 books, which are, for some people, the Bible of magic. So Initiation into Hermetics is the first book he wrote. He died under in the communist prison just above me here in Brno. And he talks about ridding yourself of parasitic sort of entities in your aura that you essentially create through bad habits. And that, you know, you create these things, and they take on a life of their own, and they sit in your aura and they suck your energy, and they want you to, they tempt you into keeping on with the bad habit, because that's how they survive and exist. They're like a vampire sucking on your bad habit, and they encourage you to keep up the bad habit. So that's a sort of very small form of what we're talking about. I also think, though, that there's a hierarchy of independent entities as well, angels and demons, if you want, that are not human, have an independent existence, but have a relationship with humanity that can be based upon stealing energy or trying to encourage you into ways where you will lose your energy deliberately, versus, I guess, the other side, if you saw it from a binary perspective, who are trying to protect and preserve you. The problem is I don't think it's a binary choice. I think that we have two, if you want, we've got two evils, and it's finding the balance, the path of least resistance between is where the good is, which is another complexity, I guess. But so I think all of those exist. And I think that your state of mind can be hugely influential on this. So if you're a real strong skeptic and you really do not believe in any of this stuff, and it doesn't worry you in the slightest, it just doesn't exist, you're a materialist, it doesn't exist, then for you, you've created a reality in which this stuff will probably never impact you.
Sure.
Because you refuse to accept its existence, and therefore you won't allow it into your reality. If you're a real true believer, then you're likely to experience a lot of this stuff because you're wide open to it, and you can see a lot of this stuff going on. And I think this is a convenient, some people would say this is convenient, but I think this is the truth of the matter. If we create our own reality, then if we are materialist and we don't allow the spiritual to enter our reality at all, then ghosts are just stuff and nonsense, and magic is bullshit, to excuse the French. But if you accept that this is a part of reality and allow it to exist in your reality and give it energy, and by the way, you give things energy by giving it your attention. It's as easy as that. Whatever you put your attention on, you're giving your energy to, then it gets life in your creation, and it takes on substance. And the depth of the substance that it takes on depends on how much energy you're prepared to give it and how much attention you're prepared to give it. My father taught me a trick when I was growing up, because he and his brother, when they were young boys, this is a story that's in one of my books anyway, this is true. This is the first story my father told me when he explained that his mother had been a medium. She used to read the tea leaves and do the tarot cards and all this kind of stuff. And one day she said to them, they can't have been very old, 7 or 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, "Would you like to see my spirit guide?" And my dad was the younger. He said, you know, he didn't even know what spirit guide was. So they said yes. And she went into some kind of a trance and turned into a Chinese man in front of them, which you can imagine scared the hell out of the pair of them.
Yeah,
and it was a very traumatic experience, one he never forgot. And this is why he was afraid of all things occult, supernatural. But his advice to me, which was basic but correct, was don't get frightened, get angry. And this is because he knew that what was happening was my fear was the food or the energy that made the phenomena stronger. And if you get angry, the fear's gone. And even though anger can be a negative emotion, it actually worked, because I mean, I had one evening where I sat in the house with a girlfriend, and my parents were away for the weekend, and I started to feel that feeling, and then all kinds of weird things, lights flickering on and off, and strange noises, and then footsteps, and the door started to open. She was terrified as well. And instead of being frightened, I just, I was protecting somebody else. I stood up and I ran to the door, pulled it wide open, and said something four-letter words like, "Why don't you just F off and leave me alone?" And that was it, finished, done for the evening. It worked. It's not a permanent solution, but it's certainly a helpful trick if you're being troubled by something that's causing you to be frightened.
And why do you think that is? What is it about the nature of negative energy versus positive energy versus any type of energy that would feed, if you want to use that word, more? Is it the power of the energy?
I think all energy is energy fundamentally. It's how the energy is created, and magic is nothing but using energy to effect.
Is it a high emotion? Is it an emotion-filled energy?
I think that there's baser energy and there's higher energy. So love is a higher form of energy, and hate is a lower form of energy. And I think if you want to, it's that white magic, black magic thing, which I don't think either is the right way to go. As I've said, I think it's not a binary world, but it's about the energy, the type of energy that you're using. And I think some entities and some astral objects utilize the negative, the base energy, to manifest themselves for some reason. I don't know why, but that would be my experience anyway. So, I mean, these days people say, well, how can you write those books? And I live alone, How can you write those books? And the answer is, well, I write the book and then I don't think about it anymore. And there's been a couple of instances where I've woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning feeling a bit uncomfortable, and I've woken up with a knocking. And of course, my blood runs cold because I'm thinking, oh my God, black-eyed kids. And then I just say, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to bother with this. And I just think about something else and switch off. And that usually does the trick. It's really about attention. If you don't give it your attention, it can't manifest. It doesn't have the energy to manifest, because it's using your energy to manifest. What I've become interested in is connecting with the land, the energy of the earth. So I've started dowsing energy lines and exploring older ancient sites, Slavic, Celtic, anything that's got more than 1,000 years to it here in the Czech Republic, in order to try to connect with, living in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, try to connect with that culture and find the magic and the energy here. It's been really successful because I've become very interested in, as I say, the Slavic hierarchy and myth and legend here. And I've started to find energy lines and energy sites. And there's not much, certainly there's not much in English anyway about this stuff. So it feels a bit like, doing the PhD, doing original research and writing about it. And it's a lot of fun and very rewarding. And it does wonders for the mood. And it does wonders to help you live in a country that's not your own and find something in it that sustains me as a human, as a spiritual person, Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and the Slavs were into animism, so everything had a spirit, everything had an entity behind it, and there's nothing more I like now than walking through the forest, and I swear the forest is becoming spiritually alive to me. And I think that again, people can argue, you're off your rocker. But I think that there's enough science now to argue from a quantum physics perspective and a psychotherapist perspective, I guess, that there is a reality that's beyond the reality. And if you think about the tree of life, it's basically Yesod behind Malkut. It's the astral, the thought form that underpins the physical reality. And I think there's evidence emerging for that.
What happens to us, what lays beyond, waiting for us when we die, has been part of our thinking for as long as we've been on this planet. It forms the basis of religion, both new and old, and as such it's accepted into the common zeitgeist of our species. A man who dedicates his life to Christianity is seen as religious, and, by most at least, as sane as the next man. He calls his creator God, the afterlife a heaven or a hell. There are saints, angels, demons, prayers and rituals and sacrifices and idols and chapels and robes and texts. None of these things raises an eyebrow. But give the Creator another name, believe that the afterlife he offers is not one of eternal light, but one of transitioning energies, and the eyebrows start to creep up. Back as far as the ancient Egyptians and before, these things were discussed, debated, and eventually followed. They took on different names, different backstories. There were new texts and different shaped places of worship and different outfits to wear. But it's all the same thing. So if you are of a religion, you must understand that the fundamentals of what you believe with regards to this apply to the basis of mankind. And if you are not of a religion, then you too must understand that the Bible and the Quran and the Torah all talk of the same thing. Of course, there are many differences to the religions of the world and of history, but take away the names, and we're all a lot closer to believing the same thing than we maybe know.
Sometimes when you read papers by quantum physicists, I get amused because they get really excited about some thought that they're having. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, but the ancient Egyptians knew this 3,000 years ago. This is nothing new. You're rediscovering something that we knew a long time ago. So what gives?
Yeah.
The only time I've ever had hate mail on my own website was when I wrote a blog article about the Bible being the most important piece of occult literature that exists. And some born-again fundamentalist in the US wrote me a long, hysterical letter calling me Satan of Satan and going to hell and damnation and all this kind of stuff. I felt kind of sorry for the guy, but because plainly he's into a certain paradigm and not thinking, but it's true, the Bible is probably the most important occult piece of work there is. And there's a lot to be gained from reading the Bible.
In the year 601 AD, Pope Gregory I sought to convert much of Northern Europe to Christianity. To ease the largely forced transition, the Catholic Church allowed many pagan beliefs, rituals, and celebrations to continue. Instead of stopping them, they would simply Christianize them. Adopt and adapt. One celebration which made the cut was the Gaelic festival, which marked the end of harvest and the beginning of the darker half of the year. Traditionally celebrated on the 31st of October and the 1st of November, it became known as All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Day, and the night before became All Hallows Evening, and eventually Halloween. It was indeed Pope Gregory I himself who instructed his people, should they see a ghost themselves, to say prayer for the lost soul to aid its passing to the afterlife.
And a lot of what's in the Bible is regurgitated anyway. And what's interesting to me is how the Christian church has made a habit of adopting paganism and taking over pagan sites in order to, as a marketing ploy, essentially, to market itself. And a good example is last year I went to a place here in the Czech Republic on the top of a hill where there is a very important site dedicated to Mary. And it's got all the Catholic trimmings. You know, you can buy little candles and images and crucifixes. And there's a monastery there, and they have all kinds of activities going on, camps, goodness knows, retreats, and goodness knows what. It's called Hosteen. So we went to Hosteen, and when I got there, I took my dowsing rods, and I was interested in trying to find the earth images, and sure enough, there were, because it used to be a Celtic fortress. And I looked at the symbols on the Catholic Church of the supposed Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, and I'm like, that is absolutely weird. First off, Mary is depicted as a lunar goddess, and baby Jesus is holding a little instrument from which lightning is coming, like the Zeus, thing. And that prompted me to do a bit of research into the origins of Hosteen, and it turned out that the Magyar Hungarian army had invaded the Czech Republic, and what was the Czech Republic, and the locals were saved from this by some miracle. And so the aristocrats who were Christian said that was Mary. But because a storm was involved and lightning was involved, the local peasantry who had not become Christian but were still pagan attributed it to Perun, the god of the Slavic god of thunder. And so what you could see in this symbol was the Christianization of the local dedication to Perun, because baby Jesus was depicted as the thunder god in the arms of the lunar goddess, which is how the pagans would have seen this. But it was all depicted as Mary and Jesus to satisfy the Christians and to bring the pagans in to and acquire a pagan site and turn it into a Christian site. And this is what the Christian church has done very successfully over the last 2,000 years. And I don't get me wrong, I don't wish to offend any Christians. I'm from a Christian background myself, and I think there's a lot to be said for Christian spirituality. A lot to be said, but I think it also pays to have an open mind and a critical mind, and to see what has taken place here, and how some of these, born of a virgin and all these kind of things actually are repetitions on repetitions on repetitions going back to time before the Egyptians. So it's the same story rolled out over and over again with different characters. Yesterday or the day before, I was walking around the castle here in the park. For the first time, I suddenly noticed these birds, and I thought they were pigeons, and then I realized they were doves. And when I looked at them, and so these doves were literally dive bombing me. And then I came across a butterfly, and the butterfly gave a dance, landed on my head twice, and I sat down and let this butterfly just dance around me. And I took it as two signs, and the dove and the butterfly have spiritual and occult meanings. And when you feed that into what I'd been getting from meditation and from walking meditation, then it all begins to make sense. And as I say, I'm going to write a book about the whole experience, probably in 6 to 9 months when I'm through with it, because I think it is an example of how you can use magic to, as I say, connect with a place and bring energy that this country was sucking the life out of me, but now I'm feeling alive. I'm taking the energy and using the energy magically, and it's made a huge difference to me. And I'd like to share that. I started with my last book was called Chasing the Shaman, and it's the start of how I started down this path. And I want to do the follow-up, which will be about, I don't know, assuming God forms and wandering through the Czech countryside and meeting blackbirds that talk to me, this kind of thing. It sounds ridiculous, but trust me, that's what's happening.
So one last thing before we have to part ways. I was going to ask. You've obviously done. You have a whole wealth of fascinating work of your own. Be that research. Obviously your great new podcast. You've also been a collector through the My Haunted Life 2.com and through the books of other people's stories. Can you share with us the one story that really sticks in your mind, obviously of somebody else's, that has really, when you read, really knocked you off your feet, either because it validated something you already believed, or it opened your eyes to maybe an interpretation of something you hadn't considered before, or it was just, really damn weird? But what's the one thing that you've collected from your time that's really sticks with you?
I think in the end, I'll go with this. One of the stories that was submitted to me about black-eyed people was a lady leaving a Walmart, and these black-eyed people seem to enjoy Walmart parking lots for some reason, because there's far more stories about Walmart and black-eyed people than you'd ever imagine. But she was leaving the Walmart to go to a car, and what she took for a homeless person was sat there, and she tried to do a big circle around him. And he looked up, and he had black eyes, the black eyes like the black-eyed kids, but as an adult. And he addressed her by her first name. And she was so shocked. And it doesn't sound much, but to me, it's an example of the connection between all things, and the fact that you can gain all kinds of knowledge indirectly through meditation and through connecting with the magical side. And in this instance, this entity, this black-eyed whatever entity, knew her name, knew what she was doing and where she was going, and this shocked her to the core. It doesn't shock me though, because that's how it works anyway. So it was like for me, it was like a powerful statement of someone else observing how this all works, that things are truly all one, connected. It's possible to have knowledge about things without talking, without asking a question verbally and getting a verbal answer. So that was probably the one that I would pick. I guess, the last word on this would be that what I'm doing, it's for me. I have a few old buddies that sort of look at me and say, well, why the hell are you putting out music on Spotify? You're 60 years old. What, you think you're going to become like a star? No, I'm doing this for me. This is my passion for life. This is me trying to get a message out. This is me learning and expressing my feelings. And I think that's tremendously important. It's very healthy for me. And if other people can, along the way, find something of value in it, then more the better. But like Alan Richardson, I think I'm less inclined these days to join some magical order or society. I've done that, been there. I'm a solo practitioner now, and I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this for the love of living, to discover what my reality is and who I am and what my part to play is.
That, quite aptly, is a magical way to go out. So Thank you so very much for coming and speaking with us. It has been an absolute privilege to hear about you. We're closely following everything you're doing. We're looking forward to episode 5, which will be out next of the podcast, The Magical World of G. Michael Vasey. And where else can we find your work?
GaryMVasey.com. I also do .net because WordPress is easier to do than blogging. So I've ended up going back to the old WordPress blog as well. So GaryMVasey.com, GaryMVasey.net. So I'm back on Twitter, GMVasey. MyHauntedLife2.com. I've got a lot of websites. I do a book review site as well for strange magical books I review, called strangebookreviews.com, if you like that kind of thing.
Fantastic.
I can't help myself. I'm doing stuff all the time. Crazy.
Keeping you out of trouble.
Yeah, keeps me out of trouble.
Peer Beyond the Veil has been written and presented by myself, Mark Watson. Music and soundtracks are credited and licensed to Purple Planet and to Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons. All rights are reserved by our parent company, MLW Publishing. You can follow us at facebook.com/Peer Beyond the Veil, or on Twitter at Peer Beyond the Veil or at Peer Beyond 2020. Please click the like and subscribe buttons when you see them, most importantly wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps us to attract the attention we need to keep the show going, to get the guests that you all want to hear from, and to help more and more people peer beyond the veil.